Billionaire CEO reunites with his ex-wife at car dealership and rediscovers the value of family love. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Richard sat in his corner office, sunlight bouncing off the glass walls that offered a view of the bustling city below. Papers covered every inch of his mahogany desk, each contract more urgent than the last. He was a man accustomed to balancing colossal deals, but the pressure this morning felt more tangible than usual. The phone on his desk kept flashing with messages about the looming merger that could expand his luxury car dealership empire nationwide. The anxiety in each caller's voice seemed to echo his own thoughts. Time was running out, and every decision he made today carried heavy consequences. As he scanned another financial report, Allie, his ever-efficient assistant, appeared in the doorway. She looked as if she had run the entire length of the building just to reach him. Without hesitation, she announced that a demanding customer was causing a scene on the showroom floor. "She insists on speaking directly to you," Allie said, her voice breathless but respectful. Richard brushed a hand through his carefully styled hair. He considered telling Allie to find Jackson, their best salesman, to handle it, but he sensed from her expression that this was no ordinary upset buyer. He left his office and strode down the hallway, passing the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased rows of gleaming luxury cars. The hum of conversation and the faint smell of leather greeted him as he stepped onto the main showroom floor. Sales staff hovered discreetly near an imposing SUV, shooting anxious glances in Richard's direction. Richard approached, steeling himself for whatever argument might unfold, but he stopped short the moment he recognized the figure standing by the large SUV, Michelle. The air seemed to leave his lungs, and for a moment, all he could do was stand there in stunned silence. She was every bit as poised and graceful as he remembered, yet there was a new tightness around her eyes, as though life had worn her down in ways he couldn't imagine. Their gazes locked, and it felt as though the busy dealership faded into a hush. She was his ex-wife, the one he hadn't seen in years. His heart hammered in his chest, and despite the professional persona he wore like a well-tailored suit, he couldn't hide the flicker of shock in his eyes. Michelle's posture was rigid, her arms folded, as if preparing for a confrontation she would rather avoid. He cleared his throat, forcing himself to speak. "I heard you were looking for the boss," he said quietly. "Didn't realize you still kept such a hands-on approach," she replied, her tone guarded. "I need a car, something bigger for my family." His focus shifted to the two boys standing beside her, each with features that tugged at his memory. One was slightly taller, the other shyly keeping half a step behind his brother. Both glanced up at Richard, eyes brimming with curiosity, as if assessing whether they should recognize him. A sudden wave of guilt crashed over him. He forced himself to maintain composure, but inside, a whirlwind of emotion threatened to break through. The tension between them was as tangible as the polished chrome on the showroom cars. From the corner of his eye, he noticed employees and onlookers craning their necks. Jackson, his top salesman, lingered nearby, ready to step in with the usual pitch about horsepower and leather seats, but he seemed to sense this situation needed a different approach. Michelle took a breath. "My boys need more space, and I was told this dealership offers the best in larger vehicles." Her tone was clipped, as if she were keeping a tight grip on her emotions. Richard nodded, swallowing the knot in his throat, and gestured toward the SUV. It looked like a pristine beast of a vehicle, sleek, spacious, and expensive. Exactly the kind of car that had made his dealership famous. He was about to respond when a sharp voice cut through the air. "Richard, we need to finalize those figures for my new purchase," came the insistent call from a silver-haired man standing near a glossy sports car. It was Mr. Collier, a VIP investor who had been waiting for personal attention from the CEO himself. Richard's schedule had already been chaotic before Michelle's arrival, and he could tell Collier didn't appreciate being sidelined. Richard gave the investor a polite nod. "Give me a moment, please. I'll be right there." Mr. Collier frowned. A moment is all I can spare. I've been waiting a long time, and you know how important our deal is." Michelle's posture tightened at the man's dismissive tone. Richard felt his own irritation rise but pushed it down. Now wasn't the time for heated words. He turned back to Michelle, forcing a calm tone. "Let's step to the side and talk about what you need." She set her jaw and nodded curtly. Her eyes flicked back to the boys, who looked uneasy under the bright showroom lights. Richard led them to a quieter corner by a panoramic window. The sun cast their reflections on the spotless floor, making the space feel strangely intimate, despite the crowd around them. "I know this is unexpected," he began softly, "but let's try to keep things civil. What kind of car are you looking for?" Michelle hesitated, glancing at the boys. "They're growing fast, and my older car just won't cut it anymore. I need something that's safe, comfortable, big enough, and I need it soon." The unspoken subtext of her words gnawed at him. She seemed strained, as if there was something urgent behind her request. Before he could respond, Collier stalked over with a pointed glare. "Richard, you promised to show me the new lineup. My time is valuable." Richard clenched his teeth. "Mr. Collier, I understand your time is valuable, but I'm with a customer right now." "Customer?" Collier's voice brimmed with indignation. "We have a major deal in progress, or did you forget that your entire merger depends on my endorsement?" Michelle's lips thinned in a tight line. Before Richard could intervene, she spoke up. "So, because you're rich and powerful, he's supposed to drop everything and cater to you?" The tension in her voice was unmistakable. Collier bristled. "Excuse me?" She didn't back down. "He's dealing with a family matter right now, so maybe you can give him 5 minutes." Other employees watched with wide eyes. Jackson, sensing trouble, drifted closer. Richard glanced around, noticing security staff inching forward as well. The air crackled with a hostility that made every onlooker shift uncomfortably. Collier stepped forward, pointing a finger at Richard's chest. "I came here to seal a deal that's going to catapult your business to the next level. If you can't handle a bit of multitasking, maybe you should reconsider your priorities." Michelle's face went rigid. "He is handling his priorities. Your arrogance doesn't help anyone." A hot flash of anger swept through Richard. Collier was stepping over the line. At the same time, a pang of surprise shot through him at Michelle's defense. For years, they had hardly spoken, yet here she was, bristling at someone who disrespected him. Mr. Collier pressed on. "This is the respect I get from you, Richard, after all I've done to push your merger?" Richard opened his mouth to respond, but Michelle beat him to it. "Are you seriously complaining about respect after barging in like you own the place?" Collier's temper flared. He leaned in, jabbing his finger in the air between them. "You have no idea what's at stake here, lady. Richard and I are discussing millions. Billions, actually. You want a car? Go find a salesman to help you. Let the grown-ups talk business." That was too much. She squared her shoulders, stepping closer. "I won't be dismissed, not by you or anyone else," she snapped, her voice trembling with anger. Collier's face reddened. He shot a glare at Richard, as if blaming him for this confrontation. The tension spiked, and Jackson quickly slid in beside them, trying to act as a buffer. "Maybe we can calm down." Richard, feeling his own patience fray, moved to intercept Collier before the man could say anything worse. He put an arm out, carefully but firmly, stepping in between the investor and Michelle. Collier's chest heaved with indignation, and for a tense moment, the entire dealership seemed to hold its breath. "Look," Richard said, forcing his voice into a tone of controlled authority. "I value your support, Mr. Collier, but my ex-wife and children are here, and I owe them my respect. We'll settle your deal, but not if it means disrespecting them." Collier seemed to realize how many eyes were on him. He lifted his chin, smoothing his jacket as if to reclaim some composure. "Fine, but this had better not be a sign of how you manage other investors. My time is money, and I expect results." He spun on his heel and marched off toward the opposite side of the showroom. Staff parted like a wave to let him through, whispering amongst themselves. Richard released a slow breath, aware his heart was pounding. His gaze darted to Michelle, who looked both rattled and strangely relieved. Trying to salvage some professionalism, he turned to her. "Let's check out that SUV. I have the keys. Maybe we can do a quick test drive, see if it suits your needs." Her expression softened a fraction and she nodded. The boys would love that. They only made it a few steps toward the vehicle before Michelle's phone rang. She grabbed it, eyes flicking toward Richard as if apologizing for the interruption. The children waited patiently, their eyes on the shiny car. The bright overhead lights reflected in their hopeful faces, as if they expected the test drive to be a small adventure. "Hello?" Michelle said quietly, turning slightly away. Her voice soon shifted into a tense whisper. From the worried glance she shot over her shoulder, Richard sensed that whatever she was hearing couldn't be good news. When the call ended, she exhaled shakily, putting the phone away without meeting his eye. "Michelle?" he asked gently, noticing how her fingers gripped the phone with white-knuckled intensity. She turned to him at last, and he saw fear in her eyes, tinted with determination. "I'm sorry to do this here, but I have no choice. My situation is more urgent than you know." He frowned, about to ask for details, but she seemed hesitant. Her gaze flicked to their sons. A heavy silence passed, undercut by the hum of conversation from the far side of the showroom. In that moment, he realized he wanted to understand. No matter how much time had passed or how many regrets lingered between them, she was here, under his roof, and there was something in her voice that made him feel responsible all over again. Before he could say anything more, she drew in a trembling breath and turned fully toward him. The emotion in her eyes was impossible to miss. He waited, heart pounding, aware that everything had shifted in the last few minutes. This was no longer just about a car sale or a business deal. Their family was at the center of a problem bigger than anything he'd expected. Michelle turned to Richard, eyes clouded with worry, and says, "I'm running out of time. I need this car, and I need your help more than ever." Michelle's words still echoed in Richard's mind as they stood near the back entrance of the dealership. "I need this car, and I need your help more than ever." She looked weary, almost haunted, and he couldn't remember seeing her so stressed before. Outside, the late morning sky shone bright, reflecting off the rows of luxury vehicles displayed in neat lines. The two boys clutched the door handle, restless from standing still for too long. Richard tried to find some comforting words, but instead he said, "Let's go for a quick drive. You'll see how the SUV handles and we can talk privately." Michelle nodded, relieved to step away from prying eyes. She motioned for the boys to follow, then paused, noticing Richard's hesitation. He glanced back toward the main floor, where Mr. Collier was glaring at them with barely contained impatience. Collier's importance to the dealership's pending merger weighed heavily on Richard's conscience. He had never juggled such delicate matters all at once. Still, Michelle's distress took precedence. He gestured for her to continue and approached a sleek, dark blue SUV waiting near the exit. The staff kept these demo cars fueled and ready for potential clients to test drive, but never had Richard expected to offer it under such urgent personal circumstances. Once they settled inside, Michelle in the driver's seat, Richard in the passenger's, and the boys in the back, he sensed the tense silence engulf them. The children exchanged cautious glances, perhaps unsure why both parents seemed so wound up. Michelle gripped the wheel with white knuckles, inhaling a steadying breath before turning the key. The engine roared gently to life and they eased out of the parking area. The roads around the dealership were wide and well-maintained, a testament to the upscale neighborhood that had boosted Richard's business. Michelle navigated them with rigid focus, occasionally flicking her eyes to the rearview mirror to check on the boys. He waited until the hum of the engine softened the awkwardness. "You said you're in trouble," he ventured. "I need to know exactly what's going on if I'm going to help." She took a moment, as though testing how much to reveal. A small sigh escaped her lips. "I'm behind on my mortgage for starters," she began, voice tight. "Things have been rough. Jobs have come and gone, and the bills kept piling up." The older boy leaned forward, resting his chin on the seat. "Mom, are we really going to lose our house?" he asked in a hushed tone. Michelle's jaw tensed and Richard's heart sank, realizing how close to crisis they must be. He turned around, offering what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "You won't lose anything. We'll figure this out." The boy nodded slowly, not entirely convinced. Michelle swallowed. "It's more than just the mortgage. She stopped herself, casting a quick glance at the children before deciding to speak more gently. "I had to borrow money from someone I shouldn't have. He's got connections. Might even be tied to one of your old rivals." A flicker of recognition sparked in Richard's mind. He'd made plenty of rivals on his climb to the top. One name or another always seemed to surface when trouble brewed. He exhaled. "Tell me more." Michelle drove them into a quieter side street, lined with tall hedges and gated residences. With fewer cars around, she reduced speed. "It started off small," she continued, keeping her voice low so the boys wouldn't catch every detail. "Then the interest ballooned beyond anything I could manage. Now I'm behind on payments, and I'm being threatened. That's why I need the SUV, so we can get around safely. And also, because I might have to leave town fast if things get worse." Richard's chest tightened. Guilt and concern tangled in his thoughts. He blamed himself for being so absent in Michelle's life after the divorce that she would resort to dealing with a loan shark who might be targeting her just to hurt him. "Listen," he said, gently touching her arm. "I'll figure something out. You shouldn't have to run." She lowered her gaze but didn't reply. They turned into an empty parking lot, where new office buildings were still under construction, and Michelle pulled the SUV to a stop. She shifted into park and twisted around to check on the children, who were busy staring out the window at the cranes and half-built structures. Michelle then faced Richard fully, her posture defiant, though her eyes revealed fear. "I'm sorry to drop all this on you, but I had no choice. The deadlines for repayment are closing in, and they're not above making threats. I can't lose my home. I can't risk the boys' safety." He nodded, letting her words sink in. "We'll fix this," he murmured. "I have the resources to help. But first, I need to secure my deal with Collier. If that merger goes through, I'll be in a better position to protect you financially." Michelle opened her mouth to protest, probably to insist he focus on her crisis first, but he raised a hand gently. "I'm not putting business above you and the kids. I'm making sure I have the means to handle everything without my entire company collapsing. And trust me, Collier is on edge. This can't wait, for either of us." Reluctantly, she nodded. Then, sensing the children's growing impatience, she turned back to the wheel. "Let's head back before he starts yelling at your employees." The drive back to the dealership was silent, a swirl of pressing worries filling the SUV. When they arrived, Michelle found a spot near the front entrance. Before they could climb out, Allie appeared on the sidewalk, waving anxiously. Richard rolled down his window, and she leaned in, her usually calm manner rattled. "Mr. Collier's been asking for you non-stop. He's threatening to call off his entire investment if you don't meet him in the next 5 minutes. Richard sighed, stepping out of the vehicle. The boys hopped down, fascinated by the luxurious surroundings, far different from what they were used to. Michelle joined them, her posture stiffening again, preparing to face the interior drama. Inside the showroom, Collier stood by a sleek silver coupe, arms crossed. A small entourage of junior investors hovered behind him. The moment Richard approached, Collier's eyes flashed with irritation. "I hope your personal errand is resolved, because I have pressing business to discuss, and you're making me look like an idiot in front of my associates." Richard forced a smile, though tension rippled beneath. "Apologies. Let's find somewhere to talk privately. I'll straighten out everything you've been waiting on." Collier shot Michelle a frosty glance. She returned his stare but said nothing. Jackson, noticing the potential for another confrontation, quickly stepped in. "Why don't I show these two young men our lounge area?" he offered, addressing Michelle with a bright smile. "They can have a soda on the house while you handle grown-up stuff." Michelle whispered a soft thanks, relieved. She and the children followed Jackson to a quieter section of the dealership, leaving Richard and Collier in the heart of the showroom. Collier wasted no time. "I have an entire team waiting on results, and I'm standing around while you chase after personal distractions." His voice was low, but the frustration carried. "This merger is top priority, and I won't be jerked around. You either give me the assurances I need or I pull my capital." Richard forced himself to stay composed. "I understand. Let's head to the private lounge, get all your questions answered, and finalize the details. Then we can schedule a signing date." Collier gave a curt nod. "That's more like it," he said, turning on his heel. Before following, Richard glanced toward the lounge area where Jackson was chatting with the boys, who clutched their paper cups with wide-eyed curiosity. Michelle stood off to the side, checking her phone. A frown crossed her face and she showed the screen to Richard from a distance. Though he couldn't make out the exact words, her urgent gaze told him it was more bad news. She moved closer, lowering her voice. "It's another text from the same unknown number. Time's almost up. They're not letting this go. Richard, I don't know how much more I can take." He frowned. "Stay calm," he said in a quiet tone. "Jackson's here, and you're safer inside the dealership than anywhere else right now. I'll handle Collier, and then we'll figure out how to deal with this threat. I won't let them harm you or the kids." Despite the fear in her eyes, she attempted a faint smile of thanks. Richard nodded, heart pounding with the weight of everything he needed to balance. Years had passed since he last played the role of protector for this family. Maybe he hadn't done a good job of it then, but he swore he'd do better now. He took a steadying breath and headed back toward Collier, who was already striding down a hallway marked Private Lounge. The investor glanced at his watch with exaggerated impatience. Richard quickened his pace, determined not to make the man any angrier than he already was. They reached the sleek doors leading into the lounge, a space reserved for VIP clients and major investors. Soft lighting and plush armchairs created a sense of exclusivity. Collier stepped inside without waiting, tossing a pointed look over his shoulder. Richard was just about to follow when Allie rushed up behind him, eyes wide, cheeks pale. She grabbed his sleeve, voice trembling with a mixture of urgency and apprehension. "Richard, sorry, but I overheard something. There's talk going around about sabotage within the dealership. I don't have all the details yet, but I knew you'd want to hear it immediately." Richard paused, startled. The day was rapidly spiraling beyond anything he could have anticipated. A sinking feeling twisted his stomach. If sabotage was in play, it could threaten not only his personal life but also the entire future of the merger. Collier was already on thin patience, and any sign of internal sabotage would send him running. He straightened his shoulders, meeting Allie's worried gaze. "We'll deal with it. Just stay on it, discreetly. Find out who's behind it. Right now I have to keep Collier from walking out." Without another word, he turned and walked into the private lounge after the investor, mind racing with possibilities. He had no choice but to address Collier first and then confront whatever sabotage was brewing. Halfway through the door, he realized Allie hadn't let go of his sleeve, and he shot her a look of apology before gently pulling free. She nodded, swallowing hard. Just as Richard walks to the private lounge with Mr. Collier, Allie rushes in, pale-faced, whispering that she overheard something about sabotage within the dealership. Richard froze in mid-step outside the private lounge, Mr. Collier just ahead, when Allie's urgent whisper echoed in his ear. Sabotage within the dealership. The word alone tightened the knot already coiled in his stomach. He held up a hand to pause Collier, offering the investor a polite, forced smile. Collier frowned but stayed put, tapping his foot impatiently. Richard guided Allie a few steps away, voice low. "Tell me exactly what you heard." Allie glanced over her shoulder to be sure no one was eavesdropping. "A staff member said there's a leak. Someone's been passing inside information, financial details, maybe even client lists, to a competitor. They overheard it during a phone call in the break room." He inhaled sharply, feeling every muscle in his shoulders tense. The day had started stressful enough, but now there was a threat gnawing at both his personal life and his business from within. "Keep this discreet," he said. "We can't let rumors spread any more than they already have." Collier cleared his throat from the entrance to the lounge. Reluctantly, Richard gave Allie a nod and turned to face the investor, offering an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry. Urgent matter," he said, gesturing for Collier to enter the sleek meeting room. Inside, the air conditioning hummed softly, and an array of pastries and fresh coffee sat on a side table, arranged for a smooth investor presentation. Collier didn't bother looking at the refreshments. He sank into a leather armchair and tapped a sheaf of papers. "I've wasted enough time. Let's get straight to it." Richard settled across from him, trying to maintain an aura of confidence while his thoughts flickered with worry. "I appreciate your patience," he began, holding Collier's gaze. "We're finalizing the financial statements you requested. Once you and I review them, we can move forward with drafting the merger agreement." Collier studied him carefully, eyes sharp. "You look distracted. We can't afford any slip-ups now, not with the timeline we agreed on. You understand my partners are already restless, correct?" Richard suppressed a sigh and forced a cool half-smile. "I'm aware. I've made this deal a top priority." Collier opened his mouth to press further, but a phone vibrated on the table, a muted hum that made Richard flinch. He glanced down, realizing it was his phone, though he'd set it to silent. Looking at the screen, he noticed a text from Allie, who'd apparently discovered something else. Collier followed his gaze, frowning. "Care to share what's so important?" the investor asked. Richard quickly locked the screen. "Just an update on that urgent matter from earlier. We're dealing with it. Now, about the expansion proposal." He shuffled papers, launching into a recap of the dealership's growth metrics. For a few minutes, the conversation remained strictly business. Collier occasionally took notes, though his stern demeanor never softened. Richard responded with smooth explanations, but an undercurrent of tension lingered, especially when Collier set aside the documents and leaned forward. "Tell me the truth, Richard," he said quietly. "Is your personal life about to explode in some scandal? Investors don't like negative press. If you're dealing with something that could go public, we need to know." Richard's jaw tightened. He thought of Michelle and the children, of the menacing texts she'd shown him. "It's under control," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Nothing that will affect the deal, I promise." Collier didn't look satisfied, but he nodded curtly and resumed reading. Meanwhile, on the main floor, Michelle lingered near the SUV, her arms crossed protectively around herself. She kept checking her phone, half dreading the next message. The boys stood beside her, looking bored by the elegant cars that had once seemed so fascinating. Jackson approached, wearing his typical salesman's smile, though his eyes reflected concern. "Everything all right?" he asked Michelle gently. She hesitated, glancing at her sons. "I'm just waiting for Richard. We have things to figure out." Jackson nodded, glancing around as if making sure no one was within earshot. "I won't pry, but you should know there have been rumors of sabotage. Small stuff, really. Power glitches, missing documents, weird phone calls. It's been happening for weeks now." Michelle's heartbeat quickened. The more she heard, the more she suspected that her own troubles and Richard's sabotage problem might be intertwined. Could the same people be pressuring her? If so, it seemed her simple plan of buying a car and escaping quietly had been a naive one. She must have looked pale because Jackson added quickly, "We've got a good security system, and if anyone tries anything, they'll have to go through me first." He said it half-jokingly, but there was real sincerity in his voice. She managed a small nod. "Thanks, Jackson. I appreciate it." In the lounge, Collier was probing deeper. "There have been whispers in certain circles that your personal life could become a PR nightmare. If this dealership is tied to a scandal, we could all lose big. I need assurance that you have it handled. Either that, or I walk." Richard clenched his fist under the table. "I'm close to resolving it," he repeated. "Let's finalize these terms, and you'll see I'm fully committed." Collier looked at him for a long moment, then exhaled sharply. "All right, then I want a final meeting tomorrow with my partners in attendance, in person. That gives you, let's be generous, 24 hours to get everything else in order." At that, he rose, straightened his blazer, and grabbed his stack of papers. "I'm heading out. If I don't see real progress tomorrow, Richard, I'm done. And trust me, my partners won't just pull out of this deal. They might blacklist you from future investments altogether." Richard stood, forcing a measured tone. "I'll see you tomorrow." Collier brushed past him, leaving with brisk steps that echoed in the corridor. Richard followed, but paused when he saw Michelle waiting with a phone pressed against her ear, her face stricken. She ended the call abruptly, lowering the phone slowly as if the weight of it was too much. He hurried to her side, ignoring the staff who pretended not to watch. "Michelle?" She swallowed hard. "Whoever I owe, they're getting more aggressive. They said if I don't pay by tomorrow, they'll come to my place and take anything of value. That includes the kids' things." Richard felt a jolt of anger mingled with protectiveness. "I won't let them near you or the boys," he said firmly. "We'll figure out the money. I'm not letting these people push you around." She looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and lingering doubt. "We'll have to do something fast," she murmured. His phone vibrated again in his pocket, and he remembered Allie's message about the mole. He looked around at the staff gliding in the background, each focused on their task. Could one of them be feeding sensitive data to a competitor? The thought tied his stomach in knots. "We have more to worry about than just these threats against you," he said quietly, leaning in so the children wouldn't hear. "Allie thinks someone in my own team is trying to sabotage the business from inside. It could be connected." Michelle's eyes widened in alarm, and a flicker of recognition seemed to pass over her face. "Could it be the same people who gave me the loan? Maybe they're using me to get at you." Richard pressed a hand to his forehead, the pieces falling into place. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." A sudden commotion near the glass doors drew his attention. A middle-aged man in a crisp suit strolled in, scanning the dealership floor as though searching for something or someone. His gaze landed on Michelle for a second, and Richard noticed a calculating look before the man turned away and blended into the crowd. Michelle's breath caught. "I've seen him before. At the bank, I think. Or near my neighborhood. I'm not sure, but he looks familiar." Richard followed the man with his eyes, but the stranger disappeared behind a line of gleaming sedans. "Stay close," he warned. "If you see him again, let me know immediately." She reached for her phone again, quickly glancing at a new message that made her face go pale. He leaned in, catching only the words, "tomorrow" and "oh." Before he could ask, Allie approached, tension lining her features. She waited until the children were distracted by a shiny convertible to speak. "I think I found a clue about the mole. It's someone with high-level access to our financial records. I can't prove it yet, but I have a suspicion." Richard nodded grimly, every muscle taut. "Keep digging, discreetly, and if you can, lock down any files that would compromise the merger or expose personal data about Michelle." Allie walked off quickly, leaving Richard and Michelle alone once more. They stepped back from the main cluster of employees, words soft so the boys wouldn't panic. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "I promise you, I'll protect you and the kids." She blinked back tears, then looked at her phone again as it lit up with another notification. The screen turned her expression from sorrow to alarm. Richard steadied himself. "What is it?" Michelle clutched her phone, reading a dire text. "Your time is up. Either pay or watch everything fall apart. Michelle stood rooted to the spot, her phone clutched tightly in both hands. The last message she'd received still glowed on the screen like a silent alarm. Your time is up. Either pay or watch everything fall apart. The words seemed to echo in her mind, a grim reminder that she no longer had the luxury of waiting or hoping things would resolve on their own. Across the polished floor of the dealership, the employees continued their routine, but the entire place felt charged with an undercurrent of unease. Richard stepped close, careful not to startle her. His heart pounded at the sight of Michelle's pale face and trembling fingers. "I'm here," he said, keeping his voice low. "We'll figure this out. You're not alone." She blinked, snapping back to the moment. "They aren't bluffing this time," she whispered. "We're in over our heads." Before Richard could reply, Allie approached, looking even more nervous than before. Her gaze darted around, making sure no one else was listening. "Richard, I just got wind of another issue. Our system had a strange power surge in the finance office. The computers went down for 10 minutes and some records disappeared." She paused. "It's possible someone is deliberately wiping data." Michelle tensed. She and Richard had already suspected sabotage was being used to put pressure on him and perhaps force her into a corner. Now it was happening in real time. "This can't be a coincidence," she said, slipping her phone into her purse. "I'm certain the people threatening me are connected to whoever's sabotaging the dealership." Allie's anxious eyes flicked between them. "What do we do?" Richard exhaled slowly, forcing himself to think clearly. "First, we lock down the key files and see if any backups exist. Next, we keep an eye on everyone: customers, staff, deliveries. If there's a mole inside, we can't let them keep feeding information to our enemies." He wanted to offer reassurance, but the words tasted hollow. Allie nodded and hurried off, leaving Michelle and Richard alone again. The neon lighting from the car displays reflected off the polished tiles, casting a glossy sheen that felt at odds with the tension in the air. Nearby, the boys lingered by a display of luxurious sedans, occasionally glancing over with concerned expressions. Michelle hurried to them, resting a gentle hand on each shoulder. "We're going to a quiet corner, okay?" she murmured, guiding them away from the bustle. Richard followed, scanning the faces around the dealership for anyone suspicious. He kept recalling the well-dressed stranger who had appeared earlier. If that man was part of this conspiracy, there was no telling what might happen next. They found a relatively calm spot near the rear offices. A wide window looked out onto the service area where mechanics worked on expensive engines behind glass partitions. Michelle ushered the boys onto a small couch intended for waiting clients, whispering a quick reassurance that they'd head home soon. Each child nodded, though their eyes were full of uncertainty. As she stood, Michelle locked her gaze on Richard. "You said it yourself. This goes deeper than I realized," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're targeting you too. I might have led them straight here." He rested a hand on her arm, the old familiarity between them surfacing despite the years apart. "Don't blame yourself. They want to exploit any weakness that can be used against me. We'll show them we won't fold." He tried for a confident smile, but his worries surged at the thought of how vulnerable they all were. Michelle took a shaky breath. "There's a man, Victor Morales, who's been linked to some questionable loans. I've heard his name mentioned more than once. It could be him who's after me, or maybe someone he hired. If it's truly him, he's known for pulling dirty tricks to ruin people's lives. You must have some history with him, right?" Richard recalled the name with a jolt of recognition. Years ago, he'd parted ways with Morales, who had once been interested in investing in the dealership. Their negotiations had fallen apart amid allegations that Morales's funds were anything but clean. Richard had walked away from the prospect, suspecting the man was involved in predatory lending and possibly worse. He gritted his teeth. "It's not just history, it's bad blood." Michelle tensed. "So he's using me as a pawn to get back at you. That means the sabotage, the threats. They might be orchestrated by him. Richard's frustration flared, accompanied by a fierce determination. Then we'll expose him. But first, I need to keep Collier happy enough to finalize the merger. That'll give me the financial muscle to protect you and the boys, as well as counter any moves Morales makes. Michelle hesitated, chewing her lower lip. If we wait too long, it could be too late, she whispered. I'm worried about losing the house, about them showing up at our door. He steadied her with a gentle look. I won't let that happen, I promise. Let me think of a plan. Before he could elaborate, a sudden commotion erupted near the main entrance. A panicked cry from one of the service technicians echoed across the showroom, drawing everyone's attention. Allie ran over to see what was happening, and Richard slipped his phone into his pocket, motioning for Michelle and the children to stay put. He raced toward the entrance, weaving through onlookers. There, he found the same unknown man from earlier, the one in the crisp suit who'd been lurking around. The man was now in a heated argument with a security guard, both men speaking in terse undertones that occasionally flared into raised voices. Richard stepped in, his posture commanding. Is there a problem here? The stranger gave him a once-over, a thin sneer playing at the corner of his mouth. Just trying to do some business, he said. Your guard here won't let me pass. The security guard looked relieved to see Richard. He has no appointment and can't provide a reason for being back here. He keeps demanding to speak to certain employees but won't say which ones. You must be Richard, the stranger said smoothly, ignoring the guard's explanation. I've heard about you. Richard's nerves tightened like a drawn bowstring. Then you know this is private property. State your business or leave. A dangerous glint flickered in the man's eyes, but he forced a smile. Apologies. I may have gotten lost. He pulled out a sleek business card and held it in front of him, letting Richard see the embossed letters Morales Holdings before slipping it back into his pocket. I'll be on my way for now. He offered no further explanation, turning to stride toward the exit. Customers and employees parted nervously. Once he was gone, the security guard exhaled. He gave me the creeps, boss. Didn't like how he kept snooping around. Richard nodded in agreement, his heart drumming in his ears. So Morales's people were brazenly stepping into his domain. That definitely meant the threats to Michelle were part of a larger strategy. Compromise the dealership, sabotage the merger, and extort money all at once. He hurried back to where Michelle was waiting with the boys. They saw the tension etched across his face. It was one of Morales's men, he said quietly, conscious of the children's ears. We need to stay vigilant. Something big is happening, and I don't want any of you caught in the crossfire. Michelle nodded, worry shining in her eyes. If they're willing to show up here, who's to say they won't come after me at home? I'm not letting that happen, Richard said firmly. If necessary, I'll hire private security. You'll stay somewhere safe until I can gather evidence against Morales. One of the boys looked up at them, voice shaking a little. Are we in danger, Mom? Michelle bent down, smoothing a hand over his hair. We're going to be okay, she said softly, though her gaze flicked anxiously to Richard. Allie reappeared, breathless from dashing across the showroom. I just talked to Jackson. He saw that man snooping near the IT office earlier, just before our finance files went down. We have a suspicious partial image from the security camera. He might have been tampering with the power cables. Richard thanked her, feeling the weight of every new revelation pressed down like a heavy anchor. Stay on top of it, he said. Check if we can recover the missing files. I'll coordinate with you soon. Allie returned to her search for answers, leaving Richard and Michelle enveloped in the nervous hum of the dealership. Michelle caught him by the arm, her voice trembling. We can't wait too long to act. Morales won't back off easily. He pressed her hand gently, trying to exude confidence. I have a meeting with Collier tomorrow morning. If that goes well, we'll have the resources to take immediate legal action and ramp up security. Once I confirm the merger's stable, Morales loses half his leverage. She nodded, though a flicker of doubt lingered in her eyes. The dealership's overhead lights cast shadows that seemed to enlarge every worry. The bright polish on the showroom cars only emphasized the darkness settling into Richard's thoughts. They guided the boys toward a side corridor, hoping for a brief moment of calm. Michelle finally let the children take a break in a small lounge area with a television, telling them to stay put and promising to return soon. As Richard checked his phone for updates, she stood close by, arms folded protectively across her chest. "It's happening fast," she whispered. "A few weeks ago, I was just worried about making ends meet. Now there's sabotage, men in suits lurking, and you, trying to save your entire empire." Richard half smiled, the gesture weighed down by fatigue. "We deal with it one step at a time. First Collier, then Morales. We'll make it through." Before Michelle could respond, Richard's phone buzzed in his hand. Expecting another text from Allie or the security team, he swiped the screen. Instead, an unknown number displayed. Taking a breath, he answered. A distorted voice on the other end hissed, "I thought I made myself clear. Back off that merger, or you'll pay the price. This is your last warning." His throat felt tight. "I'm not backing off anything," he snapped, pulse pounding. "And when I catch you, you'll regret coming after my family." A humorless laugh crackled through the line. "Such big words, Richard. Let's see if your money can protect you." The call ended abruptly. Richard lowered the phone, fury mingling with dread. Michelle stood wide-eyed as though she'd overheard enough to guess the tone of the conversation. His grip on the device trembled slightly. He drew a slow breath, trying to restore some calm before he turned to her. But her tense expression mirrored the same fear and resolve burning inside him. They were in this together, whether they wanted to be or not. With a trembling hand, Richard ends the call, realizing that his personal and professional worlds are converging into a single, deadly threat. Richard's frustration lingered like a storm cloud over the dealership, casting tension through every corner and conversation. He stood in his office, blinds partially drawn against the glare of the midday sun, phone in hand. The call from the distorted voice still rang in his ears. It threatened not only his business but also the fragile sense of security Michelle and the kids clung to. He took a slow breath and looked around the spacious room, once a haven of order and success. Now it felt claustrophobic, cluttered with half-finished contracts, reports of suspicious activity, and documents scattered like the aftermath of a whirlwind. He tried calling Collier, hoping to reassure the man that the day's chaos was under control, but the investor's phone rang without answer. The ominous silence on Collier's end told Richard that any support he had left might soon evaporate. Allie knocked softly, then slipped in. She clutched a folder tight against her chest. "We've managed to recover some data from the computers," she began, voice tinged with unease. "But it looks like a big portion of our accounts were tampered with. Passwords changed, transaction histories partially erased." Richard winced. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that Collier's team will demand explanations," she said. "And we still don't know who's behind it, or if they're acting alone." He rubbed his temples, exhaustion gnawing at him. "We'll keep digging. I won't let whoever's doing this tear the place apart." His voice sounded more confident than he felt. From outside the office window, the normally calm hum of customers milling around had shifted to a subdued chatter. The staff sensed the tension, whispering about sabotage and infiltration. Even the usual bustle felt forced, as if everyone was trying to preserve some semblance of normalcy. A knock on the glass drew his attention. Jackson stood there, beckoning him. "You need to come to the main desk," Jackson said quietly. "There's a situation." Richard followed him out, weaving through rows of shining luxury cars. At the dealership's front counter, a few of the junior employees were huddled together, looking distraught. One of them, a receptionist named Dana, held a printout of what looked like an online news article. Tears rimmed her eyes as she read aloud to the others. Richard stepped in. "What's going on?" Dana swallowed hard and passed him the paper. He scanned the headline, heart sinking as he read, Scandal rocks luxury car mogul. Allegations of shady deals surface. The article accused him of questionable business practices, citing unnamed sources who claimed he was involved in illegal financing. It spun the situation to imply Michelle's predicament was part of a larger scheme, painting Richard as the villain. He felt the blood drain from his face. "This is nonsense," he growled. "Lies." One of the younger salesmen, clearly rattled, asked in a trembling voice, "Is it true? Are we about to lose our jobs? Customers are already calling to cancel test drives." Richard clenched the paper, struggling not to let his anger boil over. He knew Morales's involvement ran deep. The man wouldn't stop at sabotage. He'd spread rumors, feed tabloids, and do whatever it took to bring Richard to his knees. "None of this is true," he told them, fighting to keep his voice calm. "We're not closing, and nobody's losing their jobs. I'll straighten things out." The small group dispersed slowly, not looking entirely reassured. Jackson lingered, placing a hand on Richard's shoulder. "You okay?" Richard blew out a sigh. "I'll manage. I just need to keep Collier on board. After the merger goes through, we'll have the resources to fight back. But until then—" He trailed off, uncertain how to finish that sentence. A flurry of movement by the SUV display caught his eye. Michelle was there with the children, and she seemed to be trying to comfort them. Their anxious faces told him that they too had heard whispers of the so-called scandal. Michelle stroked the younger boy's hair, talking softly. Seeing them reminded Richard of why he was fighting so hard. This wasn't just about business. It was about protecting his family from a threat he'd unwittingly allowed back into their lives. He joined them, forcing a reassuring smile. "You okay?" he asked the boys. The older one shrugged, arms crossed. "I heard someone say the cops might come. Is that true?" Michelle's eyes flickered with pained surprise. Richard shook his head firmly. "No one's coming to arrest us. We haven't done anything wrong." He tried to keep his tone gentle, though the tension in his chest felt like a drawn bowstring. "There's just a lot of confusion right now. We'll clear it up." Michelle searched his face. "This article, it's just lies, right?" Her voice was steady, but worry hid behind her eyes. He nodded. "Fabricated. Morales or someone he hired must have fed it to the press. They're trying to wreck my credibility. If Collier sees that piece, he might back out of the merger entirely." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I can't believe I walked into this without realizing I'd be leading them straight to you." He gently touched her elbow. "Don't blame yourself. Morales is the one pulling the strings." Before she could respond, a loud crash reverberated from somewhere near the offices in the back. Startled, Michelle crouched protectively over the kids. Richard spun around, scanning for the source of the noise. An employee in a wrinkled uniform came jogging forward, sweat beading on his forehead. "Someone's rummaging through the storage room," he shouted. "They knocked over a shelf. I tried to stop them, but they ran off through the employee exit." Richard rushed past the onlookers, weaving through staff desks and piles of promotional materials. The air smelled of spilled coffee from the fallen shelf. By the time he reached the back corridor, the door was propped open, letting in a rush of outside air. He peered into the alley beyond, but whoever was there had vanished. A stack of boxes sat overturned, and documents fluttered across the floor. He stooped to gather the scattered files, heart pounding. Something told him these might be records related to the finances or the merger, anything that could give Morales more leverage. A sinking feeling settled in his stomach as he recognized old contract copies and dealership invoices. If the intruder had taken what they needed, more trouble was on the way. Ali appeared behind him, looking alarmed. "I heard the crash. Did you see who it was?" He shook his head grimly. "They're gone." A siren wailed somewhere in the distance, the noise mingling with the normal city hum. Ali helped gather the rest of the papers, her expression grave. "I'll check our security camera feed, but if it's the same people as before, they probably knew exactly where we keep the important records." He walked back inside, heart hammering. Collier's threatened pullout, the sabotage, Michelle's looming deadline, and now these intrusions were pushing him to the edge. He needed a clear plan to stay in control, or at least buy enough time to finalize the deal and protect everyone he cared about. The entire staff seemed on high alert now, some employees whispering about whether the dealership was cursed with bad luck, others casting suspicious glances at each other. Michelle found him again, the children at her side. Their presence offered a small flicker of comfort amid the chaos. She touched his arm, voice quiet. "I still have to figure out how to pay off what I owe. My phone won't stop buzzing with messages from those people. They want money, or else we can't wait forever." He nodded, sorrow creeping into his eyes. "I know. The moment this merger is secure, I'll have the money and resources to put a stop to it all. I just need Collier to trust me a little longer." Michelle looked over at the children who clung to each other, trying to appear brave. "We can't let them live in fear." Richard made a silent vow. No matter how dire things got, he wouldn't allow Morales to destroy his family's safety. He motioned for Jackson to come over, then asked him to help the kids find something to eat in the staff lounge. Michelle hesitated, but eventually agreed, wanting the boys out of earshot of any further shocks. Once they were gone, Allie returned, phone clutched tightly. She spoke in hushed tones. "We lost power in the finance department again just for a minute. This time it looks intentional. The guy who broke into the storage room might have done something more to the servers." Richard's frustration flared. "We need to find out who's enabling this. There's no way a stranger slips in, rummages around, and slips out without an inside connection." Allie nodded. "I'm on it. But moral is dropping fast, Richard. People are afraid. Some are talking about quitting before the dealership's reputation collapses." He swallowed against the dry ache in his throat. "I can't blame them. Just tell them I'm doing everything I can. We're close to the finish line, even if it doesn't feel like it." A moment later, Jackson reappeared with a stricken expression. He held out a phone, which Michelle must have left behind for a moment. The screen glowed with a newly received text, short and chilling. Richard's gut twisted as he read the sender's name, Victor Morales. He almost didn't want to see the message, but he forced himself. A single line text from Morales. "You lose, unless you come crawling to me." Richard stared at Michelle's phone, the text from Victor Morales shining like a dire warning. "You lose, unless you come crawling to me." A heavy silence fell between him, Michelle, and Jackson. Outside the office windows, the dealership buzzed with tense energy, staff on edge from the earlier chaos. Every passing moment felt like a countdown. Michelle's voice shook as she finally spoke. "He won't let this go. If I don't pay off that loan, or if you don't abandon this merger, he'll just keep pushing." Richard set the phone on the desk, trying to appear calm in front of her. He recalled the mounting threats, the sabotage to his dealership, the men skulking around, and the data breaches that jeopardized his business. "Morales wants us to panic," he said quietly. "He wants me to give up on the deal with Collier so I won't have the funds to fight him." She nodded, her eyes drawn to the door as though expecting another unwelcome visitor. "I can't keep letting my problems spill over into your life," she began, regret tinging her words. "But I'm terrified. I have nowhere else to turn." He reached out, taking her hand. "We'll find a way," he said. "And it's not just your problem anymore. Clearly, Morales is pulling the strings to sabotage me too. If we show any sign of weakness, he'll tighten the noose." A soft knock sounded at the door, followed by Allie's anxious voice. "Richard, Collier is, causing a scene. He's asking why everything is in such disarray." Richard closed his eyes briefly, tension gnawing at his temples. "Stay with the boys," he told Michelle, giving her hand a gentle squeeze before letting go. He walked out, leaving Jackson to stand protectively at Michelle's side. Down the corridor, Collier loomed near a row of polished cars, verbally cornering a nervous young intern. The investor's entourage hovered behind him, looking equally displeased. At the sight of Richard, Collier spun around, eyes blazing. "Is this how you run a business?" Collier demanded, voice echoing off the polished showroom floor. "Your employees are frantic, your data systems keep going down, and now there's talk of criminals lurking on your property. How do you expect me to invest?" Richard forced a composed tone. "I understand your concern. We've had some issues with sabotage. I'm handling it. I promise you, the fundamentals of my business are solid, and the merger will be profitable. Don't let rumors or minor incidents shake your confidence in what we've built." Collier's mouth tightened. "Minor incidents? My partners are already asking if this place is a ticking time bomb. If I don't see immediate improvement, meaning right now, there won't be a deal." Before Richard could respond, Allie rushed up, trying to keep her voice low. "We just spotted someone suspicious again in the back hallway by the server room. Security is on the way." Collier overheard. His face darkened. "Perfect. More chaos." He threw a disgusted glance at Richard. "You want me to invest millions in this fiasco?" Richard gritted his teeth, ignoring the surge of anger. "Just give me an hour, Collier. Let me address this sabotage and prove to you we can fix it." The investor gave a short, reluctant nod, stepping aside with his entourage. Richard turned to Allie, who led him through a locked side door near the offices. The corridor beyond was dim, the air charged with tension. Faint overhead lights flickered against the cream walls, and the steady hum of the servers pulsed like a heartbeat behind a thick glass panel. A tall figure in a hoodie was crouched near the cables along the baseboard. Richard's security guard, a solid man named Keith, called out, "Hey, step away!" The intruder whipped around, face partially concealed by the hood's shadow. Then came a burst of movement. He slammed a panel shut and bolted, shoving past the startled guard. The man sprinted down the hallway with Richard in pursuit. Allie stumbled back against the wall as the chase tore past her. Richard barreled around a corner, heart hammering, catching sight of the intruder as he turned sharply into a storage room. Without hesitation, Richard lunged inside after him, dark shapes looming among shelves stacked with boxes of brochures and maintenance supplies. The intruder spun, knocking a metal rack against Richard. The sudden blow nearly toppled him, but he braced himself against the steel frame. In the flickering light, he glimpsed a flash of a patch on the hoodie, something that looked like a stylized M, reminiscent of Morales Holdings. "Who are you working for?" Richard growled, ignoring the sting in his shoulder. The intruder lunged, trying to shove him aside. But Richard, driven by anger and the need to protect his family and business, managed to hold his ground. They grappled, the storage room echoing with muffled thuds and labored breaths. A box of glossy catalogs crashed to the floor, scattering pages underfoot. At last, Keith, the security guard, appeared in the doorway, shining a flashlight into the chaos. He moved in quickly, restraining the hooded figure with a firm hold. The intruder struggled, but Keith locked his arms, pinning them behind his back. Richard coughed, catching his breath. "Turn him around," he ordered, stepping closer. With the hood yanked back, the man's face was revealed. An unfamiliar but grim look set on his features. He glared at Richard, lips curling into a sneer. Then he spat out, "Morales has deep pockets, you know." Something metallic slipped from the man's pocket, clattering on the concrete floor. Keith reached down with one hand, retrieving what looked like a key card. The bold lettering along the edge read, "Morales Holdings." Richard's suspicions crystallized. "We have proof now," he said, adrenaline still rushing through him. "You're done here." The intruder tried to twist free, but Keith's hold was unbreakable. "I'm just a messenger," he hissed through clenched teeth. "You think catching me solves anything? Morales has an army. You'll lose everything trying to fight him." Richard's gaze hardened. "We'll see about that." Allie arrived, shaking slightly. She took one look at the keycard and knew exactly what it meant. "I'll call the police," she whispered, stepping away to dial with trembling fingers. Outside in the corridor, employees had gathered in clusters, exchanging worried whispers. Jackson stood at the edge of the crowd, ready to intervene if more trouble broke out. Michelle and the kids were nowhere in sight, likely still in the private lounge or safe room which Richard hoped was secure. Guided by Keith, the intruder was led away, cursing under his breath. Richard followed, ignoring the burning ache in his shoulder. His mind raced with questions. Would the police be able to keep this man from returning? How far would Morales go to keep sabotaging the dealership? Behind them, the parted crowd stared. Collier and his entourage watched with grim faces. This kind of spectacle was the last thing an investor wanted to see. Richard caught Collier's eye across the room, but Collier's expression was indecipherable. Silently, they waited until the authorities arrived. 2 uniformed officers took statements, examining the keycard. The intruder maintained his sullen silence, only muttering a few barbed comments about how a bigger plan was underway. The police escorted him out, leaving behind a swirl of tension and anxious staff. As soon as the door closed on that scene, Collier marched up to Richard. "You expect me to stay in business with you after this fiasco?" he demanded. "Your dealership has turned into a war zone." Richard kept his voice steady. "We have evidence tying Morales to the sabotage now. The police will investigate, and once he's caught, we can move forward, stronger than ever." Collier shook his head in disbelief. "This doesn't inspire confidence. My partners will not like hearing about a brawl in your storage room." Richard tried to keep his patience, but the frustration simmered. "I know how it looks. But this is precisely why I need the merger. With more resources, I can secure the dealership properly, fend off Morales, and guarantee our success. None of what happened today changes the fact that we have a valuable brand, one you were excited to invest in just days ago." Collier sighed, casting a glance around the unsettled crowd. "I've seen enough for today. I'll speak with my partners, but don't expect them to be enthusiastic." He and his entourage departed, leaving a hollow feeling in Richard's chest. The staff began dispersing, returning to their stations with shaken nerves. Michelle emerged from a side hallway, relief flooding her features as she spotted Richard standing safely. The children stayed close behind her, looking wary. Richard approached them, scanning their faces. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Michelle nodded. "What about you? I heard there was a fight." He rubbed his sore shoulder and forced a half smile. "I'm fine. We caught someone working for Morales. The police have him now." She looked at him with a mix of concern and admiration. "I'm sorry this is happening. I never wanted to drag you into such a mess." His expression softened. "Don't you see? We're in it together. Morales is targeting both of us, and I'm not going to let him win." Michelle's eyes shone with gratitude, though fear still lingered beneath. He noticed how the children clung to her, silent questions in their eyes. His resolve hardened. He wouldn't let them live under threats and intimidation any longer. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered ominously, drawing gasps from the staff. An uneasy hush filled the space. It lasted only a second, but that second felt far too long. In the next breath, Richard's phone vibrated with a new notification. He glanced down to see an email flashing on the screen, its subject line a grim echo of the text messages that had been haunting them. He opened it and read the single sentence. "Next time, you won't see us coming." The email's warning, "Next time, you won't see us coming," stuck in Richard's mind like a stubborn splinter. He stood in the middle of the showroom, surrounded by gleaming cars and employees who pretended to continue business as usual. A hollow tension hung in the air, as if everyone sensed more trouble brewing. Michelle approached, worry etched on her face. "Any leads on who sent that email?" she asked quietly, glancing around to be sure the children weren't within earshot. Richard shook his head. "No, but if I had to guess, it's Morales again. He keeps ramping up the pressure, pushing me to cancel the merger and pushing you closer to the edge with your debt." His eyes flicked to the tinted windows at the front of the dealership, half expecting to see a lurking silhouette. She sighed. "I can't believe we're back here, entangled in all of this. After the divorce, I thought we'd gone our separate ways for good." Their gazes met in a brief moment of shared regret. They'd built separate lives, but now the past, along with Morales, had slammed them back together. As if sensing the heightened emotions, Allie approached, her voice barely above a whisper. "Richard, can I have a moment? I've got something about Michelle's loan situation." Michelle's shoulders went tense, but she followed them to a quieter corner of the main floor where the dealership's large SUV models were displayed. Allie opened a folder revealing documents marked with red annotations. "Jackson and I have been combing through the loan papers you provided. There's a clause that might be illegal, some sort of predatory interest spike that fails basic consumer protection laws. If we highlight this, we might be able to invalidate most of the debt." Michelle's eyes widened, a spark of hope glimmering. "Are you saying I might not have to pay Morales at all?" Allie nodded cautiously. "If we prove the terms violate state law, it could void the entire agreement. It won't happen overnight, but it's a start." Richard placed a hand on Michelle's arm. "That's good news. Once we get you out from under that debt, Morales loses half his leverage. We just need to buy enough time to file a legal challenge and make sure my merger goes through." A flicker of relief crossed Michelle's face. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. "But I'm also afraid Morales won't just walk away because of some legal technicality." "I know," Richard replied. "We'll stay vigilant." A soft beep sounded from the overhead intercom, and Mr. Collier's voice echoed faintly from behind a glass partition. Richard sighed, remembering the investor's ultimatum. Prove the dealership was stable and sabotage-free, or the deal was off. It felt impossible to convince Collier of anything at this point, but he had no choice but to try. Before he could move, Michelle touched his sleeve. "There's something I need to say. About us. We let each other down before. Maybe we gave up too easily. Now, seeing how fiercely you're protecting me and the boys, I realize I was wrong to shut you out completely." He swallowed, heart heavy with memories. "I blamed myself for walking away from the marriage, chasing business expansions across the country. I thought I was doing it for us, but I never looked back to see if you felt supported." She nodded, tears threatening but not quite spilling. "Maybe we were both too stubborn to fix it back then." A hush settled between them. It wasn't a grand reconciliation, but the warmth in that moment felt real, like a door cracked open after years of cold distance. Then Jackson appeared, clearing his throat apologetically. "Hate to interrupt, but Collier is in your office pacing. He says he's got to leave in 15 minutes unless you can show him some big progress on this sabotage mess." Richard reluctantly tore himself away from Michelle and followed Jackson to the back hallway leading to his office. There, Collier stood by the window, arms folded, watching the busy street outside. When he spun around, his expression was grim. "I assume you have good news about the break-ins, the sabotage, and the dozen other crises plaguing this place?" Richard closed the office door behind him. "We caught one intruder, and the police have him in custody. It's just a matter of time before they trace the chain back to Morales." "That might help your legal case," Collier retorted. "But you need to reassure my partners that your dealership isn't on the verge of collapse." Richard took a slow breath. "The fundamentals are strong. Sales are up year over year, and we have an incredible expansion plan. The sabotage is a temporary obstacle, orchestrated by a known rival. Once we finalize the merger, we'll have more resources to end this threat." Collier's gaze flicked to the clock. "I'm meeting my partners tonight. If I don't get a solid official assurance that your house is in order, they'll withdraw. Give me a chance to finalize the paperwork. We can schedule a signing date as early as next week." Richard forced confidence into his voice. Collier studied him for a long moment. "Fine. One more shot. But if something else goes wrong, anything at all, I'm pulling out." He stabbed a finger at Richard. "I won't tie my name to public scandal or unending drama." He brushed past, leaving the office with brisk steps. Richard could practically feel the tension radiating off him. Once alone, he leaned against his desk, exhaling shakily. Time was running out to prove to Collier that the dealership wasn't imploding. As if on cue, Allie darted in, phone in hand. "Richard, you need to hear this." She clicked on a recorded voicemail, a distorted voice, much like the threatening calls before. It hissed, "I see you're still clinging to false hope. You won't outsmart Morales. Walk away, or you'll watch everything fall apart." Richard cursed under his breath. "Have you traced it?" Allie's shoulders sagged. "No. Burners, scrambled IP addresses. These people know how to cover their tracks." He sank into his chair. "Okay, keep the evidence for the police." Allie nodded and hurried off. Alone for a second, Richard stared at the walls of his office, the usually comforting space now bearing the weight of a looming disaster. He had always thrived under pressure, but this was unlike anything he'd faced. Morales wasn't just after money, he wanted total destruction. At a tap on the door, Michelle appeared, carefully looking in. "Mind if we talk? The kids are in the lounge with Jackson. He's showing them those arcade games you installed last year." Richard forced a tired smile. "Sure, come in." She sat across from him, hands locked together. "Jackson mentioned a data backup. He said you're trying to secure all the dealership's records in case Morales tries to erase or corrupt them again?" He nodded. "Yeah, we're storing it off-site now, plus a couple of cloud solutions. If Morales tries to cripple us by wiping our systems, we'll recover in no time." Michelle eased back in the chair, relief flickering across her face. At least that's one less thing to worry about. Richard rubbed the bridge of his nose, exhaustion evident. "Still, staff morale is low. People are scared. We had a meeting earlier and half of them think the dealership could close if the merger collapses." Michelle leaned forward. "I get that. Maybe I could help. I used to handle communications at my old job. I can talk to them. Let them know you're fighting for everyone's livelihoods. It might calm fears." He studied her, seeing a strength that reminded him of why he'd fallen for her in the first place. "You'd do that?" She offered a small smile. "I want to do something useful. The kids can't see me like this, paralyzed with fear." He nodded gratefully, and they shared a fleeting moment of connection. Then his phone vibrated on the desk, a text from an unknown number. Michelle's shoulders tensed as he picked it up. She recognized that look in his eyes when he read something troubling. "What is it?" she asked softly. Richard swallowed hard. "Morales' next move, apparently. He's threatening a bigger, more violent approach if we don't cave." His jaw tightened. "He wants both of us broken, financially and mentally." Michelle's face paled. "We can't let him do this. We need a plan. Together." He stood, phone still in hand. "I'm done reacting to Morales. We go on the offensive. We'll gather evidence, contact the authorities, and use every legal channel to nail him for predatory lending and sabotage." She rose as well, matching his determined posture. "I'm with you," she said, voice steady. "I won't let him terrorize us anymore." Before they could outline the next steps, one of the junior assistants burst into the office, panting from a dead sprint down the corridor. Eyes wide, she gasped, "Richard! Michelle! He's here! Victor Morales himself just arrived in the dealership lobby!" Victor Morales stood in the middle of the dealership lobby, smoothing the lapel of his tailored suit as if he owned the place. Even from a distance, Richard could see the smug confidence radiating from the man's posture. Customers and staff alike gave him a wide berth, sensing the tension in the air. A security guard hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene. Michelle stood beside Richard, shoulders squared. She recognized Morales' face from old photos and her own recent nightmares. This was the man who had tormented her with threats, the one pulling strings behind the scenes. She clenched her jaw, bracing herself. With long strides, Richard approached, determined not to show fear. "Morales," he said, voice taut, "you've got some nerve showing up here." Morales offered a thin smile. "Why shouldn't I visit a place I'm about to acquire?" He glanced around, tapping a polished shoe against the tiled floor. "Lovely spot. Must cost a fortune to maintain these high-end cars and fancy decor. A hush fell over the showroom as employees watched from behind desks and vehicle displays. Michelle felt the weight of everyone's eyes, but she refused to shrink away. She stepped forward. "You're not acquiring anything," she said. "We're on to your predatory loan schemes. I've already filed a complaint about the illegal terms. Soon the courts will—" "Will what?" Morales interrupted, voice dripping with dismissive confidence. "Your complaint is worthless. I have more money and better lawyers than you could ever dream of." His gaze slid to Richard. "She's in deep with me, and so are you, in a different way. You want to finalize that merger? Good luck, once I spread more of my evidence that you're tangled in scandal." Jackson sidled closer, worried lines etched on his brow. Allie was not far behind, her phone ready to call the police if things escalated. A few steps away, Mr. Collier stood with crossed arms, his expression grim. Richard glanced at the investor, then back at Morales. "You're here to make a scene so Collier pulls out of the deal, right?" Morales chuckled. "Let's call it a negotiation tactic. You kill the merger, and I'll consider lightening the load on Michelle's debt. If not, well, accidents can happen in big dealerships full of overpriced cars." Michelle's hand tightened into a fist. "You already threatened my kids. That's a line you don't get to cross without consequences." A flicker of annoyance crossed Morales's face. "I don't recall threatening your children directly. I only said I'd collect what's owed to me if you couldn't pay." Richard's fury flared. "Don't play games, Morales. We found your man tampering with our servers. We've got the key card that ties him to you." Morales arched an eyebrow, showing no concern. "Key cards can be faked. Besides, you need more than that to pin anything on me." He turned his attention to Collier. "I can see you're an investor. Might want to watch where you put your money. Richard's reputation is precarious." Collier stiffened, uncertain whether to respond. Richard stepped in before Morales could sow more doubt. "We filed a police report. Your thug is in custody right now." Morales gave a small shrug. "People get arrested all the time. Doesn't mean they'll talk." A tense silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the dealership's cooling system. In the distance, the ring of a phone sounded unnaturally loud. Michelle felt her heart pounding. She remembered every threatening text, every frantic moment of wondering if her home would be stormed by Morales's men. Now, here he was, daring them to fight him openly. Richard, voice low, said, "You claim you want to negotiate, but all you do is threaten. If you truly had business sense, you'd know this is no way to make a deal." Morales scoffed. "I don't need your lessons. Let me spell it out. Either you sabotage your own merger, walk away from Collier's money, or I make sure your name is dragged through every scandal rag. I'll bury this dealership in lawsuits, leaks, and gossip. Michelle's problem will look like child's play compared to what I can do to you." Michelle felt a surge of anger. "You're forgetting one thing," she said. "We're not alone. There are laws against predatory lending, harassment, conspiracy." "Proving them," Morales cut in. "That's the challenge. You think you can beat me in court?" At that, Richard turned slightly, beckoning to Jackson, who stepped forward with a folder tucked under his arm. Jackson cleared his throat. "We've documented every suspicious incident, power outages, data breaches, phone threats. We also have evidence of inflated interest rates in Michelle's loan, beyond legal limits." Morales flashed a cold smile. "Evidence is worthless if no one listens." Michelle crossed her arms. "People will listen. You can't bribe every judge or pay off every authority. Eventually, the truth surfaces." A flicker of frustration crossed Morales's face. He glanced around, noticing how the staff had formed a loose circle, silently showing solidarity with their boss and with Michelle. Even Collier, standing near the front desk, seemed unsettled by the brazen confrontation. Morales's smirk returned, though this time it looked forced. "So you want a showdown, is that it?" Richard spoke in a firm tone. "We want you out of our lives. You've done enough damage, and it ends now." The tension in the room snapped like a drawn bowstring. One of Morales's men, lurking by the entrance, took a step forward, as if anticipating a physical fight. Jackson and the security guard edged closer, blocking his path. Collier, eyes wide, gestured for his entourage to stand back. He seemed torn between letting the scene play out and preserving his own safety. The staff instinctively backed away, giving a wide space in the center of the showroom. Morales glanced at his watch. "You people have wasted too much of my time." His voice grew harsher. "You think standing together changes the fact that I hold the cards? Without my approval, Michelle stays in debt. Without shutting down your merger, you'll be tied to scandal." He let his words hang, then nodded at his man near the door. "We'll see ourselves out, but don't think this is over. You'll regret crossing me." Richard, jaw set, refused to budge. "If you come near this dealership or my family again, I'll make sure you spend a long time behind bars." Morales paused in the doorway, turning just enough to cast a final withering glance at Michelle. "You should have stayed quiet. All this trouble. What good does it do you?" She stared him down, refusing to answer. The moment he was gone, the tension in the air seemed to throb with leftover adrenaline. Staff let out shaky breaths, exchanging worried looks. The security guard followed Morales at a distance, ensuring he truly left the premises. A slow murmur spread among the employees, relief mixed with lingering dread. Michelle exhaled, running a hand over her hair, trying to steady herself. Richard stood by her side, adrenaline still coursing through him, mind spinning on how to leverage this confrontation into something that could help them legally. Before anyone could catch their breath, Collier marched up, voice trembling with unmasked anger. "That's the man who's been threatening you? The one who's turning this place into a danger zone?" Richard nodded. "Yes, and we can—" But Collier cut him off, pointing a finger. "I'm pulling my investment. I can't risk tying my name to this." Collier's angry declaration, his vow to pull out of the deal, seemed to echo through the dealership long after he marched out the door. Richard stood rooted to the spot, trying to keep his composure under the weight of a single crushing thought. Everything he had worked for might collapse. Around him, staff shuffled their feet and exchanged nervous glances. Michelle hovered by the large SUV display, arms folded protectively, her eyes full of concern. He swallowed hard, feeling the dealership's polished floor beneath his shoes as if it might drop away at any second. The sleek cars, once a symbol of his success, looked almost forlorn now. Morales had spread his influence with ruthless efficiency. Sabotage, intimidation, scathing rumors in the press, each played a part in toppling the pillars of Richard's empire. Michelle stepped closer, her voice low. "He really left? After everything you've done to try to reassure him?" Richard gave a tight nod. "For now, yes. Collier's made it clear he wants out. If I can't convince him otherwise, the merger deal is dead." He paused, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. "Without the merger, I might not have the resources to fight Morales the way we need to." She placed a hand gently on his arm. "We'll find another way. Remember, we just uncovered that legal angle that could get rid of my loan debt. If that goes through, Morales loses a lot of his power over me." He rubbed his face, exhaustion settling in. "That's one victory, but it won't solve everything. Morales wants the entire dealership in ruins. He's not just after money, he's out for revenge." Michelle's expression tightened with resolve. "Let's tackle one problem at a time. First, we finalize whatever paperwork we need to cancel my debt. Then, we find a way to bring Collier back to the table, or secure a different investor." Richard glanced around at the employees who had begun quietly returning to their tasks. Their faces showed worry but also loyalty. He realized that for all Morales' threats, his staff hadn't abandoned him. If they still believed in him, maybe Collier could be persuaded too. "We'll need evidence, Michelle. Proof that Morales has done more than just offer a bad loan. We need to show that he orchestrated sabotage to force my hand." She nodded. "We have to move fast. His men already got into the servers, and they've been intimidating me for weeks. Who knows what else he has planned?" They fell silent as Allie approached, a stack of documents in her arms. Her usually calm expression was drawn tight with stress. "Richard, Jackson and I have been working on the final petition for Michelle's loan case. If the judge sees these interest rates and hidden fees, we can ask for an immediate injunction on any collection attempts." Michelle's eyes brightened with hope, though her voice shook a little. "Can we file it right away?" Allie nodded. "We're scanning everything now. Then we'll send it to a contact I have at a local firm. They might push it through quickly." Richard exhaled, feeling a slight loosening of the knot in his chest. "That's good. Thank you, Allie." He looked at Michelle with a flicker of a smile. "It's a step in the right direction." The momentary relief was cut short when Jackson hurried in, phone in hand. "I just talked to Collier's executive assistant," he said, out of breath. "His partners at the investment firm saw the commotion earlier, and they're spooked by the security risks. They're planning an emergency vote tonight to fully withdraw from the merger." Richard's heart sank. "So the meltdown is happening now?" Jackson nodded, cheeks flushed. "They might be gone for good unless we give them some reason to stay." A surge of desperation flared in Richard. Overcoming sabotage was one thing, but reversing a unanimous decision from Collier's partners seemed impossible. He glanced at Michelle, remembering the two boys waiting in the staff lounge, how they looked at him with a quiet, shy hope. Then he pictured the employees who counted on him for their livelihoods. He inhaled deeply. "Jackson, set up a conference call with Collier's board. Right now, if possible. Tell them I have crucial evidence about Morales that changes everything." Jackson's eyes widened. "We don't exactly have that evidence yet, do we?" Richard's jaw tightened. "We have enough to show them we're fighting back and that Morales is behind the sabotage. Even if it's not conclusive, we can lay out the truth. Maybe they'll hold off on withdrawing until we can present a full case." Jackson nodded, already dialing. Allie excused herself to finish scanning the loan documents. Meanwhile, Michelle stepped closer to Richard. "I'll go check on the kids," she said softly, "but let me know if I can help with the conference call." He squeezed her hand in a silent thank you, watching her walk off. A swirl of emotions pulsed through him: gratitude, guilt for the ways he'd hurt her in the past, and an urgent protectiveness that fueled his determination. Morales had wreaked enough havoc. This had to end. Minutes later, Jackson re-emerged. "They agreed to hear you out. They have about 30 minutes before their next meeting. You can speak to them via video call in your office." The news propelled Richard into motion. Together they hurried to the office. Through the glass door, Richard could see the reflection of half a dozen staff members anxiously hovering nearby. The sense of unity was palpable. Every person wanted to see him succeed, if only to maintain a lifeline for their future. He closed the door behind Jackson, stepping to his desk and checking the laptop camera angle. The screen showed a waiting room for the conference call. Each beep of a new participant entering felt like a countdown. When the final beep sounded, the faces of Collier's board members, stern and apprehensive, filled the screen. Collier himself sat at the center, arms crossed. "Richard," Collier said by way of greeting, "this had better be worth our time. We're close to finalizing a decision to withdraw." Richard cleared his throat, maintaining as steady a gaze as he could. "I understand your concerns," he began, voice firm but polite. "Let me state this plainly. The chaos you've seen at my dealership is the result of a targeted campaign by Victor Morales. He's a disgruntled ex-associate with a history of predatory lending. We have evidence linking him to sabotage, blackmail, and intimidation." One of the board members, a middle-aged man with glasses perched on his nose, raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Evidence? We've heard a lot of hearsay. Show us something concrete." Jackson stepped in with scanned documents, sharing his screen. "Here is the key card recovered from one of Morales's men, arrested on our premises. We also have these files that demonstrate abnormal loan practices Morales used to entrap an individual who's connected to Mr. Richard's personal life. The police are investigating further, but we believe it's enough to prove that Morales is actively trying to undermine the dealership. Collier's gaze flicked over the documents. Sabotage or not, negative publicity is negative publicity. My partners see headlines about fights in your storage room, break-ins, and looming debt. It doesn't look good. Richard leaned forward, knuckles resting on the desk. And that's exactly Morales's goal. Stir up trouble to scare you away so he can ruin me and keep control over the people he's extorting. If we fold now, you lose a lucrative expansion, and Morales wins. A hush fell among the board members. One of them leaned toward the camera, adjusting a set of earphones. And if we stay? Then you get in on a dealership poised for national growth, Richard said. I'll dedicate every resource to eradicating Morales's influence. We've already taken steps to secure data and improve security. We have the support of local authorities to press charges for sabotage and extortion. We just need time to finish what we've started. Collier's eyes flicked sideways to his partners. They exchanged looks in a private discussion. After a moment, Collier faced the camera again. You have until the end of the week to show measurable progress. Arrests, formal charges, and no more negative headlines. If you can pull that off, we'll hold the investment. But if Morales continues to make a mess, we're done. Understood? Richard felt a cautious wave of relief. Understood. Thank you. The screen blanked out as the conference ended. He sat back, exhaling the breath he'd been holding. Jackson gave him a subdued fist bump. We're still in the game, Jackson said, half grinning, though the clock is ticking. Outside, the dealership lights had begun to switch from their daytime brightness to a warmer evening glow. Customers trickled away as the day's business hours wound down. Richard and Jackson parted ways at the corridor, each heading off to finalize tasks before the next onslaught of problems. He found Michelle in the staff lounge with the boys, who were hunched over coloring books, the remnants of a takeout meal on the small table. She looked up expectantly when he entered. Did they agree to stay? He nodded, giving a tight smile. They're holding off, for now. We have until the end of the week to prove Morales can't touch us. Michelle released a breath, relief softening her features. That's something, at least. One of the children tugged at her sleeve. Mom, can we go home soon? We're tired. She nodded, putting a hand on his shoulder. Yeah, let's get out of here. Then she turned to Richard. But what about you? He looked around at the lounge's fluorescent lights and the tired expressions on everyone's faces. I'll finish a few things and catch up later. Just keep your phone on. They exchanged a glance that spoke of shared burdens and fragile hope. He watched her gather the children's coats and backpacks, leading them carefully through the corridor. For a moment, he pictured a future where none of them had to look over their shoulders, where the dealership thrived and the tension of old mistakes faded. That future seemed heartbreakingly distant. Allie approached, brandishing a small stack of papers. We've filed the petition to challenge Michelle's loan. The judge might see it first thing tomorrow. Good, he replied, forcing confidence. If we kill that debt, we deal Morales a serious blow. She nodded. I'll stay late in case we hear from the courthouse. Then, with a look of concern, she added, Are you going to be all right here by yourself? Richard glanced toward the front windows again. Shadows stretched across the parking lot. The day had shifted into dusk, and the hush felt ominous. I'll manage. I still have security on site. Morales would be bold to try anything else tonight. Allie gave a slight nod, though her eyes revealed lingering worry. Be careful, okay? He watched her walk away, then stepped into his office. The emptiness pressed in, the only company the faint hum of the HVAC system. Too tired to sift through more files, he settled into his chair and grabbed his phone to check messages. Maybe Collier's board had left something else, or maybe the police had updates on Morales's arrested henchmen. Instead, he found a single new text. The phone's glow lit the office in a pale wash. His pulse quickened as he recognized the pattern of unknown numbers. A single-line text from Morales. "You lose, unless you come crawling to me." Richard woke to a dull ache in his shoulders, a reminder of the scrapes and scuffles that had marked the past few days. He glanced around the quiet office, papers scattered, coffee cups abandoned, a laptop blinking forlornly on low battery. He'd spent most of the night poring over every shred of evidence against Morales, and now the morning sun was already nudging its way through the blinds, illuminating the chaos. He rose from the leather chair, mind heavy with the knowledge that today was his final chance. Collier's deadline loomed, and Michelle's legal hearing regarding the predatory loan was set for late afternoon. The swirl of dread and hope in his chest felt almost unbearable, but he squared his shoulders. If there was ever a time to fight back, it was now. Within an hour, he'd showered, changed into a crisp suit, and stepped onto the showroom floor. The dealership buzzed with a strange energy, part apprehension, part determination. Staff members whispered encouragements or greeted him with timid smiles, as though willing him to succeed so they could keep their jobs. He returned their nods, feeling the weight of their faith in him. Michelle and the boys appeared near the waiting area. The children sipped hot chocolate from paper cups, still looking a bit weary but calmer than they had been before. Michelle met Richard's eyes, and her expression carried warmth and a hint of lingering anxiety. "All set?" she asked quietly, giving him a once-over as if checking for signs of exhaustion or injury. He nodded. "I'm heading to the courthouse with the documents Allie put together. Jackson is on standby if Collier calls." He glanced at the boys and offered them a reassuring smile. "We'll beat this thing." She squeezed his hand, then gestured toward the children. "I'll drop them off with my neighbor for a couple of hours. She's offered to help watch them. Then I'll meet you at the courthouse." He leaned in, pressing a quick, gentle kiss to her cheek. The moment felt both startling and natural, a reminder of the closeness they once shared. He whispered, "We'll get through this." She nodded, eyes shining with hope, and led the boys away. Richard watched them go, heart twisting with a fierce determination to protect them from Morales once and for all. Soon he was driving across town, the cityscape rushing by. His phone buzzed intermittently with updates from Allie and Jackson. One text in particular made his heart skip. "Collier is still on the fence. Wants proof Morales is contained." Proof. That was the crux of it all. Without something definitive, the investor might pull out for good. At the courthouse, he navigated a maze of hallways until he arrived at a small, fluorescent-lit room set aside for Michelle's hearing. She was already seated at a long wooden table flipping through files. When she saw him, relief softened her features. "Allie said the judge might hear our motion to nullify the predatory loan," Michelle murmured. "But we'll have to present the evidence clearly. Morales's lawyers are rumored to be ruthless." Richard pulled a sheaf of documents from his briefcase. "We have receipts, email exchanges, interest rate charts, enough to show the terms were extortionate and illegal. Maybe it won't end everything here and now, but it's a strong start." They talked strategy until the bailiff beckoned them inside the hearing room. Michelle stood, smoothing her blouse, while Richard offered a reassuring nod. Her expression flickered with nerves as they filed in. The judge, a stern-faced woman with a sharp gaze, listened as Michelle's attorney, an older man Allie had referred them to, laid out the case. He detailed the absurdly high interest rates, the hidden fees, and the intimidation tactics. Across the aisle, an attorney in a crisp suit tried to dismiss the accusations as exaggerations, claiming Michelle had agreed to the terms willingly. But the turning point came when the attorney read out explicit text messages from Morales's associates, thinly veiled threats about collecting what's owed. The judge's frown deepened. She asked a barrage of questions about the loan's origins. Finally, she leaned back, fixing Morales's side with a disapproving stare. "These terms look flagrantly abusive," she said. "Until further review, I'm granting a temporary injunction against any collection attempts. Ms. Michelle Reynolds, You are shielded from enforcement of this loan while we investigate the legality of its contract." A stunned hush fell over the room. Michelle let out a breath, tears glistening in her eyes. She turned to Richard with trembling relief. It wasn't a full resolution, but it effectively freed her from Morales's financial grip for now. Outside the hearing room, Michelle's attorney shook Richard's hand. "Congratulations. With a little more evidence, the entire loan could be voided. Morales will have no claim at all." Michelle hugged the attorney briefly, then turned to Richard. "We did it. At least for now." He squeezed her hands. "That's half the battle. Next is Collier." They left the courthouse to find Allie waiting, phone clutched in her hand. Her expression was a mix of triumph and urgency. "I heard about the injunction. Amazing news. But you need to get to the dealership. Collier is on his way. Something about wanting a face-to-face meeting with you." Michelle tensed. "Is Morales going to try something else?" Allie shook her head. "If he is, he'll have to be fast, because Collier sounded almost optimistic. He must have heard about the court ruling. Maybe it's enough to tip him back in your favor." A flicker of hope sparked in Richard's chest. "Let's not waste a minute." Together, they rushed through the city once more, returning to the dealership under a sky thick with rolling clouds that threatened rain. The ominous weather seemed strangely fitting for such a pivotal moment. They found Collier standing near the main entrance, arms crossed as usual, but there was a different energy about him. Less hostility, more restrained curiosity. Several employees looked on from behind glossy cars, their faces reflecting cautious anticipation. Richard approached, Michelle at his side, while Allie hovered in the background, ready with documents if needed. "Collier," he said, greeting the man with a calm, direct tone. "Thank you for coming." Collier didn't respond immediately. He swept his gaze over the dealership, over staff who'd paused in their tasks, over the faint scuff on the floor from where Morales had once stood, and over the protective circle that seemed to form around Richard. Finally, he spoke. "I heard you managed to neutralize the loan issue for your ex-wife." Michelle stepped forward. "The court issued an injunction. Morales can't use that debt against me anymore. He's losing leverage." Collier gave a tight-lipped nod. "I've also been in contact with the police. They say there's a strong case building against Morales for the sabotage, the break-ins, and even blackmail. It seems you're tying up the loose ends." Richard exhaled. "Exactly. We're making progress. Enough to prove Morales isn't the unstoppable threat he pretends to be. If you'll give the dealership one last chance, we can finalize the merger on schedule." Collier glanced at his watch. "I convened my partners this morning. They were divided, but I asked them to hold off on voting until I spoke to you in person. Show me you're serious about corporate responsibility and stability. Show me you can handle adversity without falling apart." Without missing a beat, Richard beckoned to Allie, who promptly stepped forward. "We've reinforced our security systems and launched an internal review to ensure no further sabotage. We're also doubling down on transparent finances. Each partner in this merger will have open access to any relevant data." Allie's voice was clear, professional. Collier studied her for a moment, then turned to Jackson, who offered a nod. "Morale among our staff is improving," Jackson said. "They see that management is fighting back, not giving in." A pause stretched. Then Collier drew a deep breath and extended his hand to Richard. "All right, you have yourself a merger." A collective ripple of relief passed through the watching employees. Richard couldn't help but smile as he grasped Collier's hand in a firm shake. "Thank you," he said, meaning it deeply. "You won't regret this." Michelle's eyes sparkled with tears, a mix of joy and release from the tension that had clouded every waking moment. She turned and saw the boys peeking out from the staff lounge, curiosity etched across their young faces. With a gesture, she waved them over. They hurried to join her, glancing between Richard and Collier with wide-eyed wonder. Collier, clearing his throat, addressed them in a slightly gentler tone. "I should mention something else. I spoke with some of my advisory members about starting a philanthropic wing tied to family safety and community outreach. Watching how your family was targeted by Morales opened my eyes to a bigger responsibility. If we're going to invest in your dealership, we want to invest in the people, too. Richard felt a lump rise in his throat. That's incredible, he managed, realizing that his once purely business-focused dream was evolving into something that could genuinely help others. Collier gave a small nod. We'll talk details soon. For now, let's finalize the paperwork and then see if we can't celebrate this victory. As he strolled off to make a call, the staff erupted in cheers and applause. The tension that had weighed everyone down began to melt away. Jackson pumped a triumphant fist in the air, while Allie dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue, trying to maintain composure. In the midst of the excitement, Michelle turned to Richard, tears shining. "You did it. After all this chaos and uncertainty." He tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. "We did it. You, me, the boys, Allie, Jackson, everyone who stood up to Morales." She smiled, and the children rushed in, hugging them both. A swell of emotion washed over Richard. For so long he'd seen his dealership as the crown jewel of his ambitions, a testament to how far he'd come. But right now, the only thing that mattered was the warmth of his son's arms around him and Michelle's relieved laughter close by. An hour later, staff members gathered for a spontaneous celebration. Richard decided to mark the occasion by unveiling a brand-new family-friendly SUV, the one Michelle had initially come to purchase. At his signal, the protective cloth was pulled away, revealing the sleek lines of the car glinting under showroom lights. The children raced over, climbing inside with elated giggles. Michelle joined them, eyes alight. "This is the best we've all felt in a long time," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." Richard opened the driver's door with a flourish, gesturing for her to hop in. She laughed and the boys cheered as she slid behind the wheel. For a moment, the dealership's glossy surroundings faded into the background, leaving only the beaming family. Collier, returning from his phone call, watched from a respectful distance. He gave Richard a nod that seemed to say, "This is what it's all about." Richard's heart felt overwhelmingly full. He reached into the back seat, ruffling the boys' hair. They erupted into playful laughter, free at last from the fears Morales had stoked. Michelle looked at him over her shoulder, her smile radiant. All the trials and losses seemed distant now, dwarfed by the sheer relief of having survived and come out stronger. He stepped back, letting the scene soak in. After a lifetime of chasing success, building an empire that had nearly cost him his family, he realized something fundamental. None of his achievements mattered without these bright, hopeful faces in front of him. Gathering everyone's attention, he placed a hand on the SUV's open door. "You know," he said softly, looking from Michelle to the children, then around at his employees, "building this empire cost me a fortune. But winning back these kids' laughter, well, that's priceless." If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.